What does God of War hide off camera in the first chapter of the game? The answer to this question may surprise you. In this video, and more to come, we're going to be taking a closer look at some strange sequences that we're not meant to see, ranging from hidden characters, hidden objects, unnatural behavior, and more. But without any further delay, let's jump into the first chapter of God of War. We begin with the title screen where Kratos is sadly staring at the tree. The first thing I immediately did was take a look around my surrounding area. I decided to start cutting the tree down and take a look around while the first cutscene progresses. The first thing that I noticed was that the tree Kratos cuts down ends up pulling a switcheroo with a giant log. Once the tree is on the ground, it then sinks into the ground as the giant log rises, taking the tree's place. Outside of seeing them swap, the size difference helps you realize that they aren't the same object. I mean, look at it. That log is thick in comparison. But if we take a closer look, we can see the wrist wrap is stored underground as well. It too jumps out of the ground when called upon for this cutscene. It was at this point though that I realized Atreus is nowhere to be found. Where in the world is he? In this cutscene, he comes from the right side of the screen, so I kept an eye out for him, and then it happened. He emerged from the terrain behind Kratos, and even walked through the fire pit unscathed. I guess he has his flame-resist boots on. After this, you can see he drops the twig he was holding, and it just floats in the air as the scene continues. But the big question is, where in the world is Atreus hiding before the scene begins? Well, if we move in closer, he can be found hiding in these rocks, just waiting for the scene to progress. It's pretty funny to watch unfold. It's also one of Atreus' go-to moves, as we'll be seeing him show off his hide-and-seek skills throughout the entirety of this game. Moving on though, once we get to the boat, a cutscene starts as they tie the log to the boat and throw it into the water. The angles the cutscene provides prove to be for good reason, because what I found interesting here is that the log rotates a few times and actually disappears shortly after being thrown in, leaving us with a rope that's pulling nothing? I imagine this was done to save on system resources, but while I was down here, I noticed some trees just randomly hanging out. It was curious, but was something I came across commonly during my playthrough. Once we get to land, you can see the log comes back out of the ground. It's like we were never even pulling it to begin with. Atreus graciously maneuvers around the boat like a weirdo, strikes a pose, and then we move on. As we progress, once we make it to the cabin, another cutscene takes place, and if we watch Kratos during this, well, as you can see, he's got some secret talents. Also, the log that Kratos brought ends up sinking underground, never to be seen again. But while I was down here, I found closed doors that are placed underneath open doors. Although I never saw it happen, I believe these doors function similar to how the tree and log did, meaning they probably swap places based on the progression of the game. But something else that I noticed is that the body bag is empty. Where's the body at? When Kratos slowly rides into the scene, Atreus shows off some of his moves as well. But let's go back to this body bag. Not only is there no body in this bag, but the knife Atreus eventually gets can be seen stored in here. The knife remains in the bag as Kratos carries it to the fire. On the way to the fire though, you'd think Atreus would be sad during this scene. But apparently the spirit of Michael Jackson has taken possession of his legs. Can I get a Shamona? Anyway, the knife ends up appearing on the top of the bag, leaving us to believe it was placed there all along. Side note though, I believe this knife is self-aware. This won't be the last time we talk about it. But after this scene transpires, Kratos and Atreus begin tracking a deer that is quite possibly a demon. During the first appearance of the deer, you can see that it comes right out of the terrain. The deer doesn't even cross the bridge, as we are led to believe. It actually ends up defying gravity and running through a rock, eventually disappearing. The second encounter is similar, except once it gets out of sight, it begins to contort its head back into its body. I have no idea why this happens, but it's definitely terrifying. Pushing forward though, we kill our way to the next deer encounter, and this time the deer is still being creepy as it walks through more terrain, eventually walking out of bounds. However, it's this final encounter with the deer that makes you scratch your head. So in this cutscene, where Kratos helps Atreus kill the deer, a troll appears out of nowhere and causes a scene. What you don't see is that the troll does in fact come out of nowhere. It slides in and is placed right under the ledge of where Kratos and Atreus are. It's like it has warp speed capabilities or something. But during this chaotic scene, the troll throws the deer off screen. If we follow the deer, we can see it awkwardly fly through the ground, where it thankfully can rest in peace. I mean, it was dead already, but I couldn't help but feel bad for it. RIP. But during this scene, Atreus goes on his own adventure as well. He flies through the air and clips through the ground. He lies underground for a brief moment, then starts getting dragged through fire, only to find himself clipping through the ground yet again. You can see his hands desperately reaching out for help. But eventually, Atreus will rise from his grave and sync up with Kratos to finish the cutscene. At this point, I'm approaching the end of the first chapter, but I must say I was not ready for what happened next. After getting back to the cabin, the cutscene of Kratos collecting Mother's ashes takes place. During this, Atreus is doing some strange things off camera. His bow can be found slowly rotating on his person, even clipping through his head at one point. As Kratos is returning to the cabin though, Atreus moonwalks to the bed as his bow and arrows float in midair. But here we go, the ground is shaking and we all know what's coming next. While this is happening, Baldur can be found horrifically waiting for Kratos to answer the door. Possessed much? During this, Kratos hides Atreus under the floorboards. We can take a peek under and see that the model does in fact remain hiding under the cabin. I had a little trouble at this part of the game because as soon as I'd take the camera outside of the cabin, Kratos would clip through the ground and fall to his death. If we fast forward though, it's only towards the end of this intense fight that we encounter probably the most terrifying thing that this chapter has to offer. When Kratos ends up crushing Baldur with that giant piece of stone, he eventually recovers and throws the stone right back at Kratos. But while Baldur is crushed underneath the stone, he's going through quite the transformation. It's pure nightmare fuel. His arms and neck are elongated, and his teeth and gums can be found protruding from his face. Look at that smile. It's alright, Kratos. He just wants to whisper sweet nothings into your ear. He looks like the ice cream man from the movie Legion. Truly terrifying. Baldur has one last surprise for us though. After we submit and break his neck, Kratos pushes him over a ledge. If we follow his body though, he can be found floating in the air, expressing his evident feelings for Kratos. A humorous nod from the developers. Baldur's body eventually disappears though, lost in the void. But this concludes our adventures with the strange and unnatural findings of God of War Chapter 1. I do hope you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you did, and we'll see you in the next one. Later.